Hi, my name is Robert Howell. I'm the chair of the philosophy department at SMU, and I wanted to take a few seconds to talk to you about some of the things that philosophy has to offer, some of the things that philosophy does, and the nature of the undergraduate experience in philosophy at SMU. If I had to describe philosophy in the study of it briefly, it's about how to ask hard questions clearly and about learning how to make and criticize arguments both orally and in writing. I think of it as kind of a gymnasium for the mind, where the barbells and the treadmills are some of the most difficult questions that humanity has asked itself in the past several millennia. One of the results of this is that one learns about those questions at the same time as one is training the mind to ask other sorts of questions that might not even have been thought about yet. Our emphasis is on teaching our students to think and to write clearly and critically, a skill that we take to transfer to just about any discipline that you want to pursue. Now that's all very general, and many of you probably don't have any idea about what philosophy studies. So let me just take a few seconds to talk about some of the general questions that we discussed. I view one of the strongest recommendations for philosophy being the fact that this is a discipline that discusses ethics. It discusses the nature of good and bad and what we should do in very particular circumstances. So the types of questions that we study in ethics can range from the very abstract to the very specific. The very abstract questions might just be questions about what is the nature of goodness? Can there be such a thing as good and bad actions objectively without the existence of a God, or does it require the existence of God? Is good all relative? And those are very abstract questions. But there's also applied ethics, which actually focuses upon much more concrete issues. Issues such as, is it ever permissible to allow a patient to die? Or is it ever permissible to assist a patient in dying? Other questions might include, what is the nature of predictive policing, and what are some of the harms and the risks that might be involved in allowing algorithms to actually dictate criminal justice? So you can see that there are some very abstract questions and some very applied questions, and part of philosophy's beauty is figuring out how to sort of apply some of the abstract principles to some of the particular questions in order to make good arguments. A second area in philosophy is that of epistemology, which is kind of a high-flying sounding word, but basically all it is it's the study of knowledge and of what we do and don't know. Again, there's sort of an abstract aspect to this, which includes issues about like, what is knowledge? What does it take to know things? Questions such as, why is it important that a hypothesis be falsifiable in order for it to constitute knowledge or scientific knowledge? But also there's very particular issues, such as, can we know that there's a God? Or can we ever know whether artificial intelligence is conscious? And what are the implications of that? The third sort of general area in philosophy is that of metaphysics, which is generally the study of the nature of particular things. Now that's a little hard to kind of grasp. Well, let me just talk to you about a couple of questions that we might talk about. So one question that we might talk about is, what does it take for one event to cause another? So, when you have, one thing preceding another, what is it that actually leads it to be a case of causation as opposed to just one thing preceding another? We might ask questions about what is the nature of space and what is the nature of time. These are questions that overlap with physics, but also have some general aspects that can be asked independently of some of the independent physical results. There's also very particular questions in metaphysics, such as, what is the nature of conscious experience and what is its relationship to the brain? Or what is the nature of free will and do humans have it? So even though these are still sort of abstract, you can see how they're much more relevant to how we might treat each other and the ways in which we might actually pursue our lives than some of the more abstract questions. But again, it's the pursuit of some of the abstract questions that informs our answers to some of the more specific questions. Now, our department has the advantage of being a department that is very strong in research, publishing in the very top presses and journals, Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, and in general being comparable to very good graduate programs, except we're focused entirely upon undergraduates. And the advantage of that to an undergraduate is that you will be able to work with thought leaders in their area with the sort of attention that is typically lavished upon graduate students, and that allows you to develop your own path and your own research through the discipline in a way that is much more hands-on than you'll get in many other departments of this kind. We have three different optional areas of emphasis, which I mentioned to kind of give you a sense of some of the things that we study, some of the classes we offer, and some of the obvious implications of taking some of these classes. So one of our areas of emphasis is ethics, law, and society. In this course of study, one might take philosophy of law, philosophy of criminal law, the nature of liberty, but also social and political philosophy, where you study the general ways in which we structure society and whether or not some of these are just or less just than others. We also have a minds, brains, and cognitive science track. We're very strong in philosophy of mind, and this track would include areas such as minds, brains, and robotics, the philosophy of mind or philosophy of consciousness, and the philosophy of language. Our third internal track is science, technology, and medicine. This includes courses such as science, technology, and value, but also courses such as neuroethics and bioethics. We have additional minors in addition to a minor in philosophy. We have minors in ethics and a minor in cognitive science that's interdisciplinary, and an interdisciplinary minor in neuroethics. So what does a philosophy major wind up doing? Well, it may surprise you to know that not many of them become philosophers, and that's a good thing. What we want to teach our students to do is to do things that actually will apply in numerous areas. A lot of our students go into law schools and some of the very top law schools, but many of our students go on to top medical schools, top business schools, but in addition, many of our students become entrepreneurs. And the reason that they are able to do these things is, among other things, that as far as graduate school goes, our students tend to get among the very top scores among any disciplines in the humanities or really across the university. So for example, we get top scores in LSATs, in the GRE, in the GMAT. We have excellent acceptance rates to medical schools. And our graduates often say that it's the case that philosophy is not only what got them their first job, but is more importantly what got them the promotions that led to their next stage in their job, because of the fact that philosophy students are trained to ask hard questions in such a way that prompts people to come up with answers, which is something that is actually increasingly rare in our world. One of the things that you learn to do in philosophy is you learn how to read difficult texts and analyze them to figure out where is the argument. And it's often easy to get lost in a sort of a swamp of words. And one of the purposes of philosophy is to laser focus and find out where the arguments are and find out what sorts of questions can be asked in order to reveal the weaknesses of those arguments and in order to shore them up if need be. So this leads you to create arguments, but it also has a destructive tendency to take apart arguments when they're not very good. It's to ask questions, to see holes in the arguments, but also to ask questions that might allow us to make better arguments in the future, to look for possibilities that we may not have seen yet. And ideally, to be able to compose arguments both orally and in writing such that people can actually see clearly what might have been vague prior to that. The nature of philosophy can be very abstract, and it can also involve some very, very puzzling and interesting questions. But the skills that you get out of philosophy, you'll find apply to almost any area that you might pursue. If you're interested in looking into philosophy as a course of study, feel free to contact me, Robert Howell, or contact one of our advisors who are currently Matt Lockard and Brad Thompson. And any of us would be happy to help you figure out ways in which philosophy can complement a current course of study or can become your course of study, and how it might fit in with your career goals or your plans for graduate school. Thank you very much for your time.